Hey guys, welcome to today's new episode of All Sports with the Muraokas. I'm your host, Avery Muraoka, and today I have my guest, Ken Muraoka. How are you doing today, Ken?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Avery.
So I know that you yourself are a big sports fan throughout
Huge.
your whole life, correct?
Yeah, huge. Huge sports fan.
Cool. So I just wanted to, I know that I'm sure you have like a lot of interesting insight and perspective on sports, considering that you have a lot of experience. But I just wanted to kind of warm up, have a little icebreaker on this episode. And I'm just kind of curious, what are your thoughts on the 2024 World Series and like overall postseason this year?
um, well, I have mixed feelings on the World Series. I hate the Dodgers. I'm a Giants fan, lifelong Giants fan. So
Hmm.
it's just painful to see the Dodgers excel to where they are. They bought their team, right? They bought that. So did the Yankees. So it's like the two evil empires squared off, and you have like two of the biggest, most storied franchises in MLB history squaring off in the World Series. And so there's a
Right.
huge fan base and huge draw there, but then everybody else just hates these teams. So like I think a huge percentage of people sort of hate watched the World Series. I know I did. I know I did
Yeah.
to a degree. But then also though, like Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Giancarlo Stanton, like just the superstardom presence in the World Series. I thought it was really good for baseball. So if you're Major League Baseball, I think you love the World Series matchup from this year. If you're a fan like me, yeah, I watched it because it's historical and everybody wants to see Judge or Shohei do something cool. But man, I was like, could the stadium implode like in Batman when Bane blows up the Pittsburgh, like blows up the football stadium and it's like
Yeah.
collapsing in? Like, part of me is hoping that happened too.
Yeah, I know a lot of people did, but I think you brought up an interesting point. I think a big draw to those teams is the star power. But I think it's kind of ironic that, especially when it comes to Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani, they actually didn't really show up that much. Like Aaron Judge, like just not being able to show up for his team, and it's costing them.
I think it shows that baseball's hard. I think it shows professional sports are hard, right? And winning titles is
Mm.
hard, and getting all the way through 162 games and then all the postseason games and then getting the World Series and kind of the way that Judge carried him through the earlier rounds in the playoffs, like he just ran out of gas, right? And he started to find
Hmm.
it those last couple of games. He kind of broke out of his slump a little bit. I thought he might lay down a bunt at some point to like get out of his little bit of hitting slump. And so
Yeah.
like there's immense pressure on those guys to show up like that. And it shows that even with superstars, baseball's a team game. And so like
Hmm.
the Dodgers just had more of a team in the end than the Yankees did, and it showed in the World Series. So I don't know. I tuned in to see great things from those guys, but at the same time recognize if they don't perform well, like yeah, guys have down series. Like, it just happens, you know.
Yeah.
But like look at what Freddie Freeman did. Freddie Freeman filled that void. Everybody showed up hoping Shohei was going to be the show, and then he hurts his shoulder, the first game, and then
Hmm.
it's like, oh gosh, he's already coming back from elbow surgery, and now he's got this hurt shoulder, and what's it going to do? And it kind of rendered him somewhat ineffective, but he's still in the lineup. They still have to account for him. He bats
Hmm.
leadoff. You can't pitch around him because Mookie Betts is on deck, and then Freddie Freeman. And they showed that the other guys behind him in the lineup picked him up, and that makes a difference. That shows the team aspect of baseball. I thought really well.
Yeah, I think just knowing about all these like superstar players in baseball, even it kind of shows that it doesn't take one person to win a championship or to win a game. It takes the whole team. And unlike in other sports like basketball, where one person could just drive through a whole team and score a bunch of points. But I think that's kind of like almost the beauty of baseball, and kind of what makes it fun to watch, because you never know if some no name is gonna come up in with the clutch hit in the ninth inning, or if the most paid player is gonna get his shoulder hurt but still come up with the win.
Totally. Like I forget who the player was on the Dodgers. He's like their 7 or 8 hitter. Like he had a huge series, and that like it just goes to show that in baseball, even though it's individually focused, it's a team game. It's still a team game, and you still
Hmm.
have to have the pitching, and you still have to have the rest of the lineup, and everybody's got to hit, everybody's got to produce. Baseball's not 1 run, 2 run games anymore, right? It's feast or famine,
Yeah.
and guys are hitting the long ball, and so you do need a 3, 4, 5 run cushion to feel comfortable, because at any point the lineup could pop, right? So,
Yeah.
so
Especially
yeah, I
against
don't know.
teams like the Dodgers and Yankees.
Yeah, yeah. Like I personally was like, gritting my teeth, but as a overall baseball fan, I thought it was great for baseball. I thought it was about everything Major League Baseball could hope for.
Yeah, I agree. But moving on, I know that you have a lot of experience in youth sports. I know you played baseball practically your whole life, correct?
Yeah, up until all through high school, and then thought about
Hmm.
trying to play in college, but had a series of setbacks and injuries, and time caught up, and skill level wasn't high enough, and then that. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I understand that. But so knowing that, as well as your experience now as a coach and as a father of 2 kids who play sports, I'm kind of curious. What is your stance on the idea of a young kid, if he or she is um, in kind of a dilemma of wanting to play sports versus not wanting to play sports?
Yeah.
Do you think that either could have benefits and or disbenefits, like
Well,
negative aspects?
um, so I'm super biased because we are a sports centered household. But
Hmm.
Lori and I, my wife Lori and I, we both deeply believe in the benefits of playing sports, and not just any sport, but team sports. We make both of our kids find and participate in team sports. And our son,
Hmm.
Tom, your cousin Thomas, he's found team sports right from the start. He hasn't had a problem. He loves soccer. He loves baseball. He's on a basketball team. He's putting pressure on us to be able to play football. He tried
Yeah.
lacrosse. And so he's really into the team sports. So he's not one that we've had to push. But our daughter Lila has had a hard time. She's tried a bunch of different team sports. She's finally settled on lacrosse and kind of found
Hmm.
a sport that she likes and that she's part of a team. But we deeply believe in the benefits of team sports and learning teamwork and shared responsibility and being dependable and being able to depend and trust others, and making a commitment and seeing the commitment through, and all of those aspects of team sports that are other than the skills related to the sport that they develop. So we think it's critical for kids to participate in these types of team sports. And
Hmm.
it doesn't necessarily have to be a sport. There's other teams and other organizations kids can be a part of and learn a lot of those social skills. But that for us and for our household, it's really accessed and done through sports. And then the physical benefits of it, in as far as healthy lifestyle, healthy kids, growing up wanting to exercise, wanting to be physically active, that is like another benefit of having kids involved in sports at a young age, right? Is they just grow up as that's the norm, as opposed to it being something that they have to figure out and work into their life later on.
Yeah, kind of like instilling the idea of kind of just physical health and physical activity as something that should always be seen as fun instead of
Yeah.
something that's kind of a chore.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And then we get into handling adversity and handling failure, and you know, learning to lose, right? Like we tell our kids all the
Hmm.
time, because they're hyper competitive, you don't have to be okay losing, but you got to be okay at losing, right? Like you don't ever have to be okay with losing. You can be competitive and want to win all the time. And the reality
Yeah.
is you're not going to win all the time. So we spent a lot of time working with him on how do you handle and respond and react and what emotions come out when you do lose, and how do you learn to be okay at losing but still be fine and be competitive and not be okay with losing.
Right. I think that actually it makes me curious of how do you go about finding that balance between competition and having fun in these sports? Do you have would you have any advice to maybe young kids who are having that
It's
kind of
hard.
dilemma where they're
That's like one of the hardest things to balance, right? And I think a lot of that comes into play with their age and the level that they play at. Uh,
Mhm.
Thomas is hyper competitive and he plays on competitive sports teams. And so he has transitioned. He's 10. In the last year, he's really transitioned from that more developmental, love the game, have fun with the game to, all right, we can still have fun and we are going to focus more on competition. So like on his soccer team, they have 3 levels of teams and he did not make the top level. He made the mid-level team. And so
Mhm.
for him, that was his first kind of real experience not being on the top most competitive team. And it was a little bit of a challenge at first, right? Because his expectation was that he was going to be on the black team, which is the top team, but he's not. He's on the blue team. And so now he's got to learn, okay, how do I go and figure out where I've got to get better if I want to be on that black team? Where do I need to improve? What do the coaches need to see out of me? So it's for him, it's been a really moving to that more competitive level has been a really good learning experience for him. Yes, it's a
Right.
challenge, and yes, it sort of cuts at his ego a little bit. And at the same time, though, he's learning that adversity and he's learning that if he does want to be at the top, he's got to work for it, right? Which he's never really had to do in sports before. So for him, it's been really good to make that transition. Whereas my daughter
Right.
Lila, she's just starting a new sport for the very first time. She started lacrosse for the very first time this fall, all levels, and she was really nervous. She went out there, hadn't ever played before, had none of the basic skills, and it was really scary for her. And she got out there, and if the coaches were really focused on competitiveness and, looking to win more, she really would have felt, I think, pushed out and left out. But they didn't. They focused on having fun and getting to know the other girls on the team and
Mhm.
encouraging kids like her who've never played to learn. And she got really into it and she felt really welcomed and really encouraged and really safe at like trying it out. And she comes home and practices on her own and her coaches have given her tips and they saw a huge improvement in her basic skills over the course of the season. So for her, a less focus on competition was good because it got her in. So I really do think
Right.
it's like where they are in the process in their involvement with the sport, right?
She-
And the level and the league that they're playing in. Like Thomas's baseball in the spring, he plays little league and then he also plays on a more competitive sort of semi-club team. And the little
Mhm.
league, we really try and balance fun, inclusivity, a wide range of skill abilities all on the same field, all intermixed on the teams. We competitiveness in their league play so that when the postseason comes around, their league is really competitive in the postseason. Our league
Mhm.
approaches it a little more inclusive, a little more skill development, and then we separate the top kids and we give them an opportunity to do a little more competitive level in this semi club team, and then come the postseason, they're ready to be in a more competitive environment. And so it's really kind of knowing your organization, knowing your groups of kids that gets determined, and then just communicating to the families up front, like, hey, this is a more competitive environment versus this is a more love of the game, skill development environment, so that people come into it knowing what to expect. I think it's when people expect one thing and get the other that it raises the problem. I do think if you pushed competitiveness too early you run the risk of kids falling out of love of playing the game. And
Hmm.
if you take the focus too long on the fun and you're not competitive, you lose the top end kids that are looking for more competition. So you've got to like try and balance both of those things in figuring out what's the appropriate level for your team or your organization or your league or whatever that might be.
Yeah, I think that's something I personally struggled with because when I first started playing baseball around Thomas's age, I kind of struggled with that because I had fun and I was definitely competitive in the sense that I hated losing, but I think it got to the point where I kind of let that get into my head, and for basically my whole baseball career, I wasn't really sure how to handle the idea of failure in the sense that I would always think about not failing rather than succeeding. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts on that. Like, how would you kind of like if like let's say you had a kid you were coaching and they're super competitive in the sense that they don't want to lose, but they kind of have it twisted a little bit, like how I did, where
Yeah.
instead of wanting to win, they just don't want to lose. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Well, you mean your cousin's the same way. Like he hates losing more than anything. He hates not performing more than anything. And
Hmm.
it's a lot of individualized coaching and helping them, providing the space for their emotions, helping them to learn and recognize the emotions, and then helping them learn to redirect and channel that. And it's really hard. And a lot of kids, a lot of coaches really struggle with that. And I don't know. I don't know the right answer to that,
Hmm.
other than to say that it's super, super challenging, right? And at
Yeah.
the other side of that coin though is if he plays on a less competitive team in a less competitive league and level, he gets really
Right.
frustrated with his teammates, right? And then he's not a very good teammate because he expects more of his teammates. So there's a
Hmm.
balance there of understanding there's differing ability levels, understanding that you're not going to win every at bat or every pitching battle or every, he's keeper in soccer. So like you're going to get scored on. It just happens. It's part of the game. And so,
Yeah.
but that desire to never get scored on really makes him good and he's excelled at that position, right? So like you don't want to take it out of him, but you got to help develop the emotional intelligence to regulate the emotions side of it and channel
Yeah.
the emotion side of it. And that's really difficult with young kids. And
Yeah.
we've explored you know, mental health professionals and sports
Oh,
psychology and things like but he's so young still. It's kind of like gosh, do we really need to be investing in a sports psychologist for a 9 or 10
yeah.
year old kid, right? So like I don't know.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
It's probably one of Lori and my's biggest challenge as parents of Thomas is
For sure.
helping him with that emotional regulation piece of it. Whereas
Yeah.
my daughter is Lila. Your cousin Lila. She's super competitive too, and
Hmm.
she is very aware of her abilities and the types of teams she wants to be a part of. And for her, she's competitive. She doesn't like losing, but it doesn't derail her. She's able to really quickly bounce back and be like, yeah, okay, it happens. You're going to lose. Like, you know,
Hmm.
but she definitely has a competitive edge down in there. She just is a little more emotionally mature than Thomas. So she's able to regulate it a little better when it doesn't go her way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was able to learn how to kind of brush off my losses. But I think something I lacked personally was I was good at brushing off the losses, partly because I would lose so much. But I think I kind of lost my edge in wanting to win. I think I kind of forgot what it felt like and how to win. So I
Yeah.
think that was also kind of
Yeah.
another
Well, I mean,
thing I personally wish
you hear great coaches
for.
talk about all the time, right? That losing is can become a habit and like and you can get almost what you're describing, where it's not that you want to be comfortable with it, but it just happens so frequently, it becomes your sort of experience over and over, and you just kind of develop that habit, right? And so that's
Mhm.
that piece of like, well, how much do you want your competitiveness to be subsided versus not not letting losing become a habit. So I don't know. I think there's
Yeah.
balance there, and that's the same
Yeah.
balance
I
that
think.
everybody faces.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that was just interesting, and kind of wanted why I wanted to
Yeah,
see what your insight
yeah,
was.
yeah.
And I'm also kind of curious. Um, do you think that there could be benefits to only focusing on one sport, or do you think that it would usually be better for someone of a younger age to try to almost like be a jack of all trades and
Yeah.
play as many sports as they can?
I am very much in the multi-sport athlete camp. Um,
Hmm.
all of the kids on our baseball team who are the top kids on those teams all are just the best athletes out there, and they play
Yeah.
multiple sports. They can easily pick up sports. Um, Thomas, right, for example, he switched to playing keeper in soccer. And we actually saw as he got more comfortable diving to save the soccer ball and putting his body on the ground in
Uh-huh.
soccer, we saw it translate to the baseball field in that he learned how to slide. So like he's never been
Oh.
very good at sliding, and he's been thrown out a few times in big games because he wouldn't slide. And it
Hmm.
was an issue, right? And so we went out last summer, we practiced sliding, and he still would hesitate and he still would stutter step and slow down running and not really want to put his body on the ground. And then this fall, he started, you know, doing keeper in soccer and putting his body on the ground and diving for balls and sliding. And next thing you know, on the baseball field, he quit hesitating, and all of a sudden he could run and slide, no problem. And it made him a more aggressive, better base runner
Hmm.
because he was comfortable putting his body on the ground. And he never would have got there if he only played baseball. And he could have practiced sliding till he was, ripped up and had no more skin on his knee, and it wouldn't have mattered. But just playing keeper in soccer, he turned the corner, and now he's all about it. Now he's like no problem sliding. So that's like a small anecdote of multi-sport athlete, right? The hard part,
Yeah. That's.
the hard part is we've gotten to a place in youth sports where families and kids are really nervous that they're gonna get passed by other kids if they don't focus on the sport at the same
Mm.
pace, right? And
Hmm.
so there's definitely a mindset of, well, if you want to make the top baseball teams, you got to play baseball year round. And he
Yeah.
does, but he also plays soccer year round. And so what we do is we prioritize and we communicate with the coaches, hey, we're going to prioritize the sport that's in season versus the one that's in an off season. So in the fall, soccer's his priority. And so when there's a conflict with soccer and baseball, he goes to soccer. In the
Hmm.
spring, when it's baseball season's primary season, it will tell his soccer team, hey, baseball's his primary focus. So when during the spring, so when there's a conflict, he's going to prioritize baseball some. And
Hmm.
we've lucked out in that his coaches for both sports are open to that and are and have a background in playing multi-sport. So they're open to and support the multi-sport athlete. But not every coach is that way. Not every program's going to be that way. And so, they're sometimes kids are unfortunately asked to specialize much earlier than they should be because that's what it takes to get to the level of competition or the level of play they want to be at. And so
Right.
if I could like wave a magic wand and change youth sports, that would be the biggest change I make, would be encouraging multi-sport athletes, because the kids who are athletic and the kids who clearly play other sports and typically are some of the better players. And so
Yeah.
asking those kids to commit, yeah, you might have that better player for a few more months out of the year, but that particular kid is probably giving up some well-rounded things and maybe some development that they would get from the other sports, right? A
Right.
lot of it's the perversion that we've come across with every parent angling and trying to get their kid to get an athletic scholarship, right? It's so
Mm,
much of it now is sold on and marketed to families and parents like, hey, we'll get your kid on the pathway to getting a scholarship. When, yeah, that might help, but I don't know that it helps so much that it's worth giving up the other sports.
right. Like it's kind of I mean, there's even if you have the chance to get it, there's still, not always the possibility.
Yes, and the number of kids that earn scholarships is so small. It's so
Right.
small, and it's so hard. And I would make the argument that they're gonna find the kids. And there's tons of
True.
examples of kids who played other sports that get recruited for sports that they typically haven't played simply because they're big and they're athletic, right? They're big and they're strong and
Yeah.
they're athletic. Like Tony Gonzalez. Tony Gonzalez was a basketball star, right?
Oh, really?
Went to college for basketball. Yes. And then they're like, hey, have you tried football? And then boom, tries football and like, oh my gosh, look at him. He's a fantastic tight end. And then he goes on to be a Hall of Fame NFL career. So like there are
Oh,
examples of that where the colleges and the scouts know what they're looking for. And yeah,
right.
you might get some a little more development but like if you work on that on your own outside of it, it's I don't know that it's that advantageous. But
Yeah.
there's a huge economic side. There's a huge industry around specialized, individualized training for youth sports, right? There's a ton of people that
Hmm.
are making a lot of money under that model. And so that's where I think you've seen it swung. But we encourage our kids to play multiple sports and to play the sports that they like as long as possible because
Right.
eventually there will come a time where you get too old and physically unable to compete at the highest levels of the sport. So we tell our own kids that they should play the sports as long as they possibly can, as long as they want to, because eventually they're just not going to be able to.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really cool story with Thomas about how he learned how to, slide better from
Yeah.
playing
Yeah, it
soccer.
was
That's actually really
fascinating.
cool.
Like all of a sudden, just one
Uh,
game, he goes and I like as I'm base coaching, I'm watching him run the bases and I'm like, oh my gosh, he's gonna have to slide. He's gonna totally get out. And I'm like kind of like covering my eyes but peeking through the crack in my fingers. And he's like, and he slides and he's safe. And I'm like,
yeah.
what?
Like,
And Lori looks at me from the stands and she's like, what? Oh my god! And the other coach, who's like been trying to get him to slide for years is like, dude, you just
what?
slid. Like, what? Dude? Like, everyone is stunned, right? And then the players who know, his buddies who he's played with for years are like, Thomas, nice slide, dude. Where'd you learn to do that? Like, it was amazing. Like, it was, and it was like, oh my gosh, that is a direct result of him playing goalkeeper on his soccer team.
Yeah, that's really cool. He learned how to pull out with the swim moves
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
avoid the tag.
Yeah. So,
And also I think another big, um, speaking of like big professionals, Mookie Betts from the Dodgers.
yeah.
He can dunk, he
Yeah.
can bowl.
Yeah.
Obviously, he plays baseball.
Yeah.
I think he's also. I don't know if he is. I think he's also a good wide receiver. I would assume.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, like I think this is something that I've also kind of begun to delve into recently.
Yeah.
I mean, I played a year of football, and I kind of wish I'd played a little bit longer because I
Yeah.
think I had potential, but it was
Yeah.
just I couldn't learn enough of the rules
Yeah.
really because there was kind of a lot, so I
Yeah.
felt like I was hindered by that.
Yeah.
But I think if I had some more chances, I could have
Yeah.
been more
If you had
successful in
just
football
started
too.
a little earlier, right? And that's the other piece too.
Yeah,
Like you learn the rules progressively. Youth sports are built to like add complexity to the rules as you grow in levels, right? Like Thomas's soccer team's not
hmm,
allowed to head the ball. And that's a big difference in the rules. And in a couple years, they're going to be allowed to head the ball. That dramatically changes the dynamic of the game, right?
right.
Um, so I think there's totally an element of that too, of like, but there are kids that find success late. Like we have at our high school, we have a senior baseball player who's in my classes. He went out for football for the first time this year, and he was a
Hmm.
stud. Like he started both ways. He made all league as a running back. Like he like was amazing, and it was the first time he ever put on pads and played football. And he was the best athlete out on the field. He's the point guard on the basketball team. He's the catcher on the baseball team. And oh my gosh, he's the starting running back and corner on the football team. Like, the best athletes are the kids you want, right?
Yeah.
So I could go on and on that I think multiple sports I wish the pendulum would swing back toward multi-sport athletes.
Yeah, for sure. I think just to kind of wrap things up, after, I think we've had a really good conversation so
Yeah.
far, but I think just, yeah, to wrap things up, I'm kind of curious, what are your thoughts on gaming as a sport?
Yeah, right. Well,
Like, I
so
mean, especially considering that gaming has become, not only
oh
so
yeah.
popularized, but
Oh
even
yeah.
like competitively, it's become super,
Oh yeah.
super big. So, like, let's
Yeah.
say Thomas or Lila, or just anybody that decided that they wanted to kind of pursue that. What are your thoughts?
Um I've come around on this. If you had asked me this question 3 or 4 years ago, I'd be like, video game. I'd be like the old man yelling at the clouds, like, get off
Yeah,
my lawn, like, oh, video games aren't a sport. Rawr. But if you go back all the way back to the first part of what we were talking about, right? About like
hmm,
playing sports, learning to be part of a team, learning to rely on others, learning to like do
yeah,
your part toward like all of those things would exist in esports in a team format, right?
right.
Now, the physicality, the exercise element, that isn't
Yeah,
there.
that's
But
definitely not there.
but like a lot of the other stuff is. So I've come around on esports. I mean, you can't deny the popularity. You can't deny the billion-dollar industry that exists out there.
Hmm.
You can't deny the ability for kids to make money at something they're good at. Like, so I don't know. Is it the same? Not exactly.
Yeah.
Should it be a thing? Absolutely, right? And it's so funny because like I tell
Hmm.
this to my students all the time. Like, I remember as a kid, one of the things parents would say is like, well, you can't play video games all the time because what are you going to do? Grow up and be a professional gamer? Like, that's not really a thing, right? Well, fast forward 20 years later, and guess what? Professional gamer is a thing. Like, so it's
They're
kind of,
everywhere.
yeah. So so part of me is like in disbelief that it's a thing because as a kid, I was told it'll never be a thing, right? But
Right.
it absolutely is a thing, and it is a potential revenue stream for kids that are good at it. And it is some
Hmm.
fine motor skill development, and it is data and information processing. Like the NFL used to give, they don't do it anymore, but they used to give the Wonderlic test at the combine, right? And the
Okay.
Wonderlic test is a test of of information processing. How quickly and accurately do you process information? And for a lot
Mm.
of positions in the NFL, not super important, but for some positions, it's really important. Well,
Yeah, like QB and stuff.
being able to game at a high level. When I sit down and play a video game now with Thomas, it melts my brain. I cannot handle all of the things on the heads up display, right? Like the map and the weapon scrolling, and like there's just way too much going on. And I'm like, Thomas, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. There's so much information. He's like, well, what do you mean? This is that, and this is this, and this is that, and this. And I'm like, oh my God, you like absorbing and processing so much information and so quickly to be competitive in these games. Like, yeah, it's not really in my mind. Like, I'd rather you be outside physically running around, but
Hmm.
also there is some benefit there, right? There is some piece there. So gaming as a sport, I'm coming around on it. I definitely
Okay.
am moving in that direction from a like naysayer, crotchety old man to a okay. This is a thing. There are kids. This is a benefit for some kids. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm moving in that direction. Uh,
Yeah, I think gaming definitely does lack the physicality, but I think it makes up a lot in the kind of mental aspect
yeah,
of it all,
for sure,
especially as you said, like the data processing
for sure.
and
for sure.
just teamwork
Yeah.
and even
Yeah.
competitiveness, I
Yeah.
think.
Well, yeah, and it teaches that like resilience and overcoming adversity and perseverance and like all those things that we cite sports with building and creating inside of people. Yeah, esports can do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be really fascinating
Uh,
too as VR penetrates the gaming world more. You might
I know,
you
which,
might actually see the physicality being able to be replicated, right? Without the
yeah,
injury risk. Like I don't know, like it's kind of fascinating to start thinking about like, oh my gosh, what if all of a sudden there are these like VR pods with the 360 treadmills and you do have to run around and jump and crouch and like there is a physical aspect to it. So I don't know, like things have come so far technology wise that maybe those things do merge down the road,
hmm
you know?
and I mean, who knows? 20 years changed, like a lot of things changed in your 20 years between
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
early days of gaming to
Yeah.
now. So who
Yeah.
knows what'll happen in the
Well,
next
and
20
then
years?
like the other piece of it too is like what kind of crossover is there? So like kids who grow up playing Madden, right? And
hmm
maybe they're not physically and athletically gifted, but they really understand football strategy and they really understand play calling and they really understand situations and they decide to pursue a career in coaching because
hmm
they can see the game in that way as opposed to the physical skills to play, right? So like what's not to say that doesn't grow as a result. I don't know. Like I'm definitely coming around on gaming as a sport, right?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is.
All right. Well, I think that concludes all the questions that I had for you today. I'm
All
really
right.
glad that I had you on this podcast. I think
Yeah.
you brought a lot of interesting perspectives and insight, and I'm really happy that you were able to uh, share your time with me and,
Yeah.
just having a nice discussion.
Yeah, this is super fun. All right. I love it. Thanks for
All
having
right.
me on.
Thank you. Yeah. Have a good day.
All right. See you later.